My name's Eleanor Brooks. I am 62 years old, and for most of my life, I was the woman everyone relied on but no one truly saw. I was the one who remembered birthdays, mailed cards with neat handwriting, cooked meals for neighbors when someone got sick, and showed up early to every family gathering to set the table just right. I didn't do these things for praise. I did them because that's what women like me were taught to do. Keep things running, keep things pleasant, keep quiet, especially keep quiet. This Christmas was supposed to be no different till my daughter told me, gently but firmly, that I wasn't needed this year. She said it over the phone like she was discussing the weather. "Mom, we've decided to keep things simple. You don't need to come. No argument, no explanation, just that sentence. You don't need to come." I remember staring at the wall afterward, noticing a tiny crack near the window that I had meant to fix for years. Funny how you notice small things when something inside you breaks clean in half. For decades, I had been the emotional glue in that family. When my husband passed, I swallowed my grief so my children wouldn't feel uncomfortable. When my son moved across the country and stopped calling, I made excuses for him. When my daughter slowly replaced me with her friends, her work, her new traditions, I told myself that was normal. That's what growing up looks like. But hearing that I wasn't needed anymore didn't feel like independence. It felt like disposal, like a chair someone finally threw out because it no longer matched the room. I didn't cry. At my age, tears don't come easily. Instead, I sat down at my kitchen table, the same one I hosted Thanksgiving dinners around for 35 years, and asked myself a question I had never dared to ask before. What happens when the woman who holds everything together simply stops? Not out of spite, not out of drama, just stops. That night, I walked through my small house, touching the objects that told the story of my life. The recipe box filled with handwritten cards, the photo albums no one had opened in years. The guest room I kept ready just in case. I realized something uncomfortable but powerful. My family hadn't pushed me away because I was difficult. They pushed me away because I was convenient, reliable, predictable, and people rarely value what they believe will always be there. By the time I went to bed, one thought kept me awake. Not anger, not revenge, curiosity. What would happen if this Christmas, for the first time, I chose myself instead of being chosen? The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. The house silent in that way only winter mornings can be. I made coffee and didn't rush. That alone felt rebellious. For years, December meant schedules. Lists, reminders sent on behalf of others who forgot I was the one who booked. Hotels for relatives. Coordinated gift exchanges. And quietly covered expenses when someone fell short. No one ever asked me to do these things outright. They simply expected them. Expectation is a clever thing. It wears the costume of trust while slowly turning into entitlement. As I sipped my coffee, my phone buzzed on the counter. A message from my daughter. "Just checking in. Hope you're okay with the plan." The plan. As if my absence were a logistical detail, not a human one. I typed back, "I'm fine," which was true. I was fine in the way people are fine when something inside them has gone numb. Later that afternoon, I opened the old cedar chest in my bedroom. Inside were decades of letters, documents, and things I had saved because someone once told me they mattered. I hadn't opened it in years. At the bottom, wrapped in yellowed tissue paper, I found papers I had nearly forgotten about. A small savings account opened when my children were young. Money I had quietly set aside from part-time work, meant to help me later in life. Or so I thought. As I read through the statements, my hands began to tremble, not with fear, but with recognition. The account had been emptied years ago. Withdrawals I didn't remember approving. Signatures that looked like mine, but weren't. I sat there for a long time, the room tilting slightly. Memories rearranging themselves into a new, uncomfortable shape. Christmas wasn't the first time I'd been excluded. It was just the first time I couldn't ignore the pattern. I thought back to the times my daughter told me money was tight. but still managed lavish vacations. The times my son borrowed funds and never mentioned repayment, I had always assumed I was helping, that this was what love looked like at my age. But love doesn't erase you. Love doesn't rewrite your signature and call it necessity. That evening, I received a call from my sister. "So," she said carefully, "I heard Christmas is smaller this year." Her tone told me everything. "People talk." I smiled to myself. "Yes," I replied, "much smaller." What I didn't say was that something inside me had grown larger, heavier, more solid. I wasn't planning revenge. I wasn't plotting drama. I was simply done pretending that being erased was the same as being at peace. That night, I wrote a list, not of chores, not of gifts, a list of truths I had ignored. At the top, I wrote one sentence: "If I am not needed, then I am no longer responsible." I slept better than I had in years. 2 days before Christmas, something shifted. The phone started ringing more often, questions disguised as concern. "Are you sure you're okay? You seem quiet lately." Quiet. I had been quiet my whole life. The difference was, now I wasn't filling the silence for anyone else. I didn't remind my children about traditions. I didn't ask about arrival times. I didn't offer solutions. And without me smoothing the edges, the cracks began to show. My daughter called again, irritation creeping into her voice. "Mom, people are confused. They're asking who's bringing what." I paused before answering. "I assumed you had it handled," I said calmly. The line went quiet. That silence told me more than any argument could. For the first time, my absence was felt, not emotionally, but practically. That's when it hit me. My value had never been sentimental. It had been functional. I was useful. And now that usefulness was gone, that evening, I made a decision that surprised even me. I called a few people, old friends, neighbors, a cousin who lived alone. I didn't make a big announcement. I simply said, "If you don't have plans, you're welcome to come by. No matching plates, no perfect decor. Just warmth. The kind that doesn't need approval." As word spread quietly, something unexpected happened. People showed up not because they were obligated, but because they wanted to. They brought simple dishes, stories, laughter that wasn't rehearsed. For the first time, Christmas didn't feel like a performance. It felt honest. Later that night, as I watched snow fall softly outside my window, my phone buzzed again. A message from my daughter. Short, sharp. "I didn't realize how much you did." I stared at the screen, feeling no triumph, just clarity. I typed back, "Neither did you," and for once, I didn't add anything else to soften the truth. Some lessons don't need explanations. They need consequences. As I turned off the lights and sat among people who chose to be there, I realized something that took me 62 years to learn. Being needed is not the same as being loved. And sometimes, the quietest woman in the room holds the power simply by standing up and walking away. By Christmas morning, the snow had settled like a soft warning over the neighborhood. Beautiful, quiet, and impossible to ignore. My small living room was full of mismatched chairs, borrowed folding tables, and people who didn't quite fit anywhere else. A widowed neighbor, a retired schoolteacher whose children lived states away, a cousin who had quietly admitted she felt invisible at her own daughter's house. None of us were supposed to be the main event this year. Yet, here we were, sipping coffee from chipped mugs, laughing without obligation. I watched them from the kitchen doorway and felt something unfamiliar settle in my chest. Not pride, relief. For decades, Christmas had been about making sure everyone else felt comfortable, impressive, proud. This year, no one was performing. We were just present. Mid-morning, my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a question. It was frustration. "Mom, people are upset," my daughter texted. "They assumed you were coordinating things." I read it twice before replying. "I wasn't asked to," I typed. Then I put the phone face down. That simple act felt louder than any argument I'd ever had with her. As the day unfolded, I noticed how often people asked me things gently, respectfully. Would you like help? Is this okay with you? I wasn't used to that tone. In my family, my consent had always been assumed, never requested. Around noon, my son finally called. His voice was tight, controlled. You really couldn't just come? He asked. Not why. Nah, how are you? Just couldn't you make it easier? I wasn't invited, I replied calmly. There was a pause. You know what I mean, he said. I did. He meant, couldn't I just absorb the discomfort again? Couldn't I just smooth it over? For the first time, I didn't rush to reassure him. I spent years showing up when it hurt, I said. This year, I stayed where I was welcome. Silence stretched between us. He exhaled sharply. You're being dramatic. I smiled to myself. When people lose access to your labor, they often call it drama. Maybe, I said. Or maybe I'm just done being convenient. I hung up before he could respond. Later that afternoon, as plates were cleared and laughter softened into comfortable quiet, I realized something unsettling. My family hadn't fallen apart without me, but it wasn't whole either, and the gap I'd left behind was finally visible. The question wasn't whether they'd forgive me. The question was whether I'd ever return to a place that only valued me when I was useful. That evening, after most of the guests had left, the house felt warm and tired in the best way. I sat at the table with my sister, the last of the pie between us. She looked at me for a long moment before speaking. You know, she said quietly, they've leaned on you your whole life, I nodded. I let them, I replied. That truth tasted strange but clean. She hesitated. Your daughter called me earlier. She's angry, confused, hurt. I didn't interrupt. She said she feels like you abandoned her. I stirred my tea slowly. I didn't abandon her, I said. I stopped abandoning myself. My sister sighed. She doesn't see it that way. I looked up. That's not something I can fix anymore after she left. I sat alone in the dim light, thinking about all of the times I'd been told, you're the strong one. Strength, I'd learned, often meant being silent so others could stay comfortable. My phone buzzed again. A message from my daughter, this time longer, defensive, carefully worded. She talked about stress, about how hard it was hosting, about how she felt judged. Not once did she mention uninviting me. Not once did she ask if I was hurt. I typed a response and deleted it, then typed another, deleted again. Finally, I wrote one sentence. I needed you to want me there, not just expect me to manage everything. I didn't send it, not yet, because something else had begun to surface inside me. Not anger, not sadness, boundaries, and boundaries don't beg to be understood. They simply exist. The next morning, I woke to missed calls. My daughter, my son, even my ex-husband. Something had gone wrong. I could feel it. When I finally answered, my daughter's voice cracked through the phone. Mom, I didn't realize how hard it would be without you. There it was. Not, I'm sorry. Not, I hurt you. Just realization through inconvenience. I closed my eyes. I wasn't trying to teach you a lesson, I said. I was trying to survive with my dignity intact. She sniffed. So what now? That question lingered. What now, when the person who held everything together finally sets it down? I thought about the quiet joy in my house, about being asked instead of assumed. Now, I said slowly, things change. She didn't respond right away. And for the first time, I didn't rush to fill the silence. Because some silences are necessary. They make room for truth. 2 days after Christmas, my daughter came to my house. She didn't call first. She stood on the porch, hands in her coat pockets, eyes tired. For a moment, I almost reverted, almost rushed forward, apologized for the discomfort. Instead, I opened the door and waited. Can I come in? She asked. The question startled me. She'd never asked that before. Yes, I said, stepping aside. She looked around, taking in the simple decorations, the leftover plates, the sense of something lived in rather than staged. It looks peaceful, she murmured. I nodded. We sat at the table where I'd spent so many years preparing meals for others. She didn't start with an apology. She started with an explanation. stress, expectations, feeling overwhelmed. I listened without interrupting, the way I always had. When she finished, she looked at me hopefully as if waiting for absolution. I understand why you were stressed, I said. Her shoulders relaxed. But understanding doesn't erase what you did. Her breath caught. I didn't mean to make you feel unwanted, she said. I held her gaze. But you did. The room felt heavy, but honest. She swallowed. I didn't realize how much you did for us. I leaned back in my chair. That's 'cause I made it look easy. Tears welled in her eyes. I'm sorry, she whispered. The words were small, late, but real. I nodded once. That's a start. She reached for my hand, then hesitated. I let her take it. Things won't go back to how they were, I said gently. I won't disappear so you can shine. She nodded, wiping her face. I don't want that, she said. I studied her. Maybe she meant it. Maybe she didn't yet understand what it would cost. Then we'll learn something new, I replied. After she left, I stood alone in my kitchen, the late afternoon sun spilling across the floor. I felt lighter, not because everything was fixed, but because I no longer needed to be invisible to belong. Sometimes, the most powerful thing a woman can do, especially after 16ers, to finally stop earning her place. And once you do, everyone has to decide how much you were really worth to them all along. The days after Christmas were quieter than I expected. No dramatic fallout. No explosive apologies. Just space. Real space. The kind I'd never allowed myself before. My phone still buzzed, but less urgently. Messages weren't commands anymore. They were questions. Are you free? Would you like to join us? That shift alone felt like a small revolution. One afternoon, as I folded laundry slowly, deliberately, I realized something unsettling. I didn't miss the chaos. I didn't miss being needed every second. I missed being respected. And that was new. My son called later that week. His tone was different. Less defensive. More careful. Mom, he said, I didn't realize how much pressure you carried. I waited. Let him sit in that discomfort. I thought you liked doing those things, he added. I smiled faintly. I liked feeling included, I corrected. There's a difference, he went quiet. We took advantage of that, he admitted. It wasn't an apology, but it was closer than he'd ever come. After the call, I walked through my house again, noticing how differently it felt now. It wasn't a waiting room anymore. It was mine. That evening, I pulled out an old photo album and flipped through pictures of younger me. A woman always standing slightly off to the side, holding a serving dish, watching instead of resting. I touched the page and whispered softly, You deserved better. For the first time, I wasn't angry at her for staying. I was grateful she'd survived long enough for me to finally choose differently. That night, I wrote another list. Not of grievances, of boundaries, simple ones. I will not explain my worth. I will not show up where I am tolerated, not celebrated. I will not trade peace for approval. These weren't punishments. They were promises, and I knew keeping them would be harder than breaking any silence. Because the world is very comfortable with women like me being quiet. It does not adjust easily when we stop. Spring came slowly that year, as if even the weather needed time to adjust. My relationship with my children didn't magically heal, but it transformed. They no longer assumed I would step in. Sometimes they forgot to call. Sometimes plans fell apart. And for once, I let them. I learned to sit with the discomfort of not fixing things. That was the hardest part. One afternoon, my daughter invited me to dinner. Not to help, not early, just dinner. When I arrived, the table was imperfect. Food slightly overcooked. Conversation awkward at first, but I wasn't directing anything. I was simply there. Halfway through the meal, she looked at me and said, I never saw how tired you were. I nodded. I hit it well. She reached across the table. I don't want you to disappear again. I met her eyes. Then don't make me. Something shifted between us then. Not reconciliation, recognition. Later, as I drove home, I thought about how many women my age were, still shrinking themselves to keep families intact, still being told they were strong while being quietly drained. I wondered how many of them believed it was too late to change the rules. It isn't. It never is. I started volunteering differently, not for obligation, but for joy. I joined a local book club, took long walks without telling anyone where I was going. When people asked why I seemed different, I told them the truth. I stopped trying to earn my place. Some nodded. Some looked uncomfortable. That told me everything. Not everyone benefits when you stop overgiving, and that's okay. Growth is rarely convenient for the people who relied on your silence. On my 63rd birthday, I woke up alone in my quiet house. Sunlight pouring through the window. There were cards on the table. Calls scheduled later. But for a moment, it was just me. I made coffee, sat down, and felt something I hadn't felt in decades. Contentment. Not the loud kind. The steady kind. The kind that doesn't need witnesses. I thought back to that phone call before Christmas. To the words, "You don't need to come." How they nearly broke me. And how, without meaning to, they set me free. My family didn't fall apart because I stepped back. They adjusted, slowly, uncomfortably, but honestly. And I learned something no one teaches women like me. Being needed is fragile. Being respected lasts. I don't know what the future holds. Maybe my relationship with my children will deepen. Maybe it won't, but I know this. I will never again beg for a seat at a table I helped build. If they want me there, they will ask. If they don't, I will create my own space, filled with people who choose me without conditions. As I rinsed my cup and looked out the window, I smiled softly. Not out of victory, out of peace. Sometimes, the bravest thing a woman can do, especially after a lifetime of givings, to finally stop proving she matters. And if you're listening to this and recognizing yourself, ask yourself one question. If you stopped holding everything together, who would still show up for you? And more importantly, would you finally show up for yourself?